Welcome everybody, TitleFight.com, Brandon Stubbs, Steve Gallegos, and Gordy Tamao here. We had our hands full with Broner Maidana card from top to bottom. We had some good excitement, and Showtime, Golden Boy Promotions, Leha Bata Promotions definitely did their fans justice in last night's card. I want to jump right into the second televised bout of the evening, where we had Leo Santa Cruz, junior featherweight, coming up against Cesar Seda in the first defense of Leo Santa Cruz's title. Steve, what was your overall take on how Santa Cruz was able to come in, pull off a decision? Cesar Seda, definitely a game fighter, came in to fight and actually threw Leo off his rhythm somewhat there. He just wasn't able to really pull the trigger ultimately and put him away, although he did drop the decision, post-fight interview, him talking about he didn't think he did enough to do what he had to do, but it gave the fans some excitement there. What was your perception of it?
It was a good performance. It reminded me a lot of his performance on CBS last year around this time, where he fought a fighter that was similar to Seda, and he had some trouble dealing with the boxer, movement style. But in this fight, he looked to solve the puzzle just a little bit better. He just kept coming forward. He used that jab, which was the key. Especially that double jab. To set everything up to the body and head. So even though Seda gave him problems at times, I still think Santa Cruz looked good. He's learning as he's going along, so he's only going to get better.
A couple names that were being dropped of putting him in the mix with a couple cats overseas in the UK, of course, that have been already talking for a minute about putting him up against Santa Cruz. But here stateside, throwing him in the mix with, even though it probably won't happen just because of the Cold War still going on, but a guy like Rigondeaux, if he was able to move to that direction, although, I was kind of perceiving that maybe a matchup with Abner Mares would be nice if he can get through Gonzalez next. Thoughts here, Steve, on what you could see Leo stepping up into against next?
Well, the winner of the Gonzalez-Mares rematch, that's probably his best bet right now. Abner Mares, stated he had no interest in fighting someone like Leo Santa Cruz, but with the Cold War going on with the top rank and fighters like Rigondeaux and Nonito Donaire being unavailable, he might as well take the next best option, and Leo Santa Cruz is that best option, for fighters at, 122 and so forth. So whoever wins this fight, whether it be Gonzalez or Mares, probably will be Mares, they should be matched up against Leo Santa Cruz next.
Yeah, and I'm definitely looking forward to see that. It's interesting how the tides changed. I remember when Leo was first coming up, and just maybe 3 fights ago, Abner really didn't want to seem to even carry on a discussion about him possibly facing Leo after he was fighting on his undercard, but things have really seemed to change. I'd really like to see them get it on next. Going into the next fight there, Brandon, you've been keeping tabs with this cat ever since the get-go from the jump. I know you've had a liking towards Keith one-time Thurman just because of that raw power that he possesses, and he's also got some skills, as far as boxing goes as well, to back it up. And he came in against a rugged fighter in Jesus Soto-Karass. I mean, this was going to be the fight that a lot of fight fans were tuning into and expecting to be some fireworks, and it did pose some of that early on, all the way up until the 9th when Soto-Karass was stopped by one time. What do you grade Key's performance on this one here? I mean, he's got some good possibilities coming up next, but as far as grading him against a guy like Karass, what was your overall grade on how his performance was?
I'm going to give him an overall grade of a B+. The reason why it's not an A+ or an A is he got kind of popped there in the beginning of the fight. So he did get tagged a little bit. He did show that his defense is still not where it needs to be with him being the puncher boxer that he is. It does at times leave him open for shots. But he can make up for it with having a strong chin, because he took a flush shot in the first round. Did buckle him a little bit. He was able to kind of gain his composure and definitely turned the tide and the momentum going into the second round, to where he really pretty much had no trouble the rest of the fight. I mean, he took clean shots. His defense still needs a little bit of work, but otherwise than that, he shows that he can take a punch, he can box when he needs to, and he just showed that power, that's something that people at 147 need to fear because he is legit.
Yeah, I totally agree there. That's going to be a risky fight for anybody to take at that division, I believe. And so whether the risk-reward ratio is going to be something that they want to take up, that's going to be, up to these other fighters' management and whatnot. But going forward with Keith, I mean, he's got a pretty good landscape to choose from here. What do you see in the mix with him as far as what Golden Boy Promotions is willing to risk putting him in the mix with? Obviously, the next bout we're going to touch base on with Broner Maidana, the winner out of that one, is definitely going to be a good choice for Keith, but that could be somewhat destructive for either fighter if they piece them together. What do you think is the best option for him?
The suggestion I saw out there on the internet last night, if it kind of makes sense, would be maybe Robert Guerrero. Maybe have him fight a guy like Robert Guerrero, a very rugged, very durable guy, very similar to Soto-Karass, but not as maybe a shot of a fighter. See if he can survive a mauling like that Guerrero is known to attempt to put on people. And if he can survive that, really after that, it's possibilities. I mean, he could obviously challenge for any of the 147 belts from there. And at that point, you can legitimately throw his name maybe in the mix for Floyd Mayweather come September.
Yeah, that was definitely building a buzz last night after he disposed of Karass in 9 rounds there. So it's going to be interesting to see him going forward there. Definitely like the guy's attitude, like what he brings to the ring, and he backs it up, so you can't knock that. Going into the main event, and what stole the show in more than one way, we had hard-hitting Argentine Marcos Maidana coming up against the flashy, the flamboyant, the somewhat arrogant Adrien Broner. And early on, we got to see Broner getting shocked and dropped by the power of Maidana, and he just totally threw him off his game plan. He recovered at one point in time, and then Marcos Maidana just imposed his will on different occasions here with him. We also seen some other antics that were a little bit outside of the norm, but maybe not so much for Adrien Broner, with him, even humping Maidana from behind. Maidana got his revenge back later on in the bout. Steve, we were watching that together there, going a little crazy when that fight was going on there. First off, what's your performance grade of Marcos Maidana and how he came in and just totally tipped over the wagon here?
He's got an A, What better performance could he have given? He came in, made a statement early, in the first couple rounds by jumping on Broner and then knocking him down in the second, which is big. Broner was able to get back into the fight, by, settling down, starting to jab, and mixing his counter shots. But Broner just, kept his poise, just kept coming, and towards the middle of the rounds, he just kept the pressure on, dropped him again later on in the fight, even though that knockdown was pretty much taken away by an intentional hit. But, he still, performed very well, just gave Broner, he beat Broner up pretty good, made a statement, showed him who was boss. So, Maidana, always loved him. He's been a great fighter over the years. His stock just improves with each fight. He's a fighter you want to see again. I can't knock him. Give him an A+.
Yeah, no, he definitely came to knock Broner's head off there, and he was definitely a patient predator and came in and threw those combinations together, which is really, I believe, what, aside from the power factor, I think that's what really threw Broner off. You've seen him having those kinds of problems with Malignaggi, and just with the volume of punching that Malignaggi had with him, just really threw him off his game plan. Maidana seemed to come in with a similar tactic, and then, of course, you've seen fighters like Gavin Rees who were able to touch Broner, which showed that he can be touched, and Maidana obviously hits a lot harder than Gavin Rees. So it was really interesting to see how Broner was not able to adapt as many people had believed he would. I myself am one of those. I thought he was going to change up his tactics and box more from the outside, and didn't seem like he really had a different game plan. Brandon, what was your take on how Broner was not able to adjust in the ring and ended up paying for it?
It's one of those things that you kind of, if you've watched enough Adrien Broner fights, you kind of knew it was going to come eventually. It was just going to be a matter of time of who was going to be able to do it. With the Ponce de Leon fight, you saw flashes of it during the Gavin Rees fight. You saw it during the Paulie Malignaggi fight, and you definitely saw it last night. At times, he thinks his skills, his talent is so superior to everyone else that he can do some of the things that he does in the ring with ease, and you can't always do that. You sometimes have to use your head a little bit and not so much your hands. You use your head, actually think out what you're doing, and don't just kind of go through the motions. And I think he thought last night he could go through the motions and he could walk down and he can win the fight going before the bell started by intimidating Maidana. And Maidana wanted a part of it. You can kind of, the cockiness was there in the first round when he humped him, which was completely uncalled for and extremely poor taste. And I'm glad that Maidana did the same to him in the later parts of the fight as well, because that was, to humble him, to show him that he can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, I would say Broner, I'm going to give his performance an F. Not so for the most part that he lost, but the way he acted in losing. The acting when he got headbutt and falling to the ground, you could tell he wanted out of the fight. From him not even wanting to do a post-fight interview and walking out and the fans pelting him with beer and spitting on him and yelling at him. It's one of those things to where you got to talk the talk before the fight. You got to walk the walk at the end of the fight. That's why I'm giving him an F. I thought his in-ring performance wasn't that bad given, what he was going against. But it's his antics, leading up to and after the fight that definitely shows that he is not ready for this platform. And if I would have bought it on pay-per-view, I would have been a little bit upset given his attitude and his demeanor following the decision being read.
Sure. From when the fight was first announced and it was a potential pay-per-view event, I was already telling myself I was going to stick to my guns and not get it just because of how Broner carries himself, and that turns a lot of fans off there. He just totally carried what he does outside of the ring, inside of the ring there, and Maidana made him pay for it, which I think a lot of people were happy that possibly Broner was going to be humbled by that. Whether or not that actually happens or happened still remains to be seen. There's already been reports that he's been talking about him partying it up already. He's going to be having his first party here on Tuesday back home, and already talking about club appearances and whatnot there. So is this really who Broner is? At first, a lot of people were saying, hey, it's just front. It's just a hype. It's just a marketing ploy to get people to buy into his fights. But is this really who he is? And if so, can he bounce back from a fight like this and, still get to that platform that Golden Boy and his management team's trying to put him on, or is he pretty much done? What do you think, Steve?
It depends on what he does afterwards. He needs to. It was a humbling experience for him. He should take it as that. As a learning, humbling experience. He's not invincible. He went into this fight, thinking that he couldn't be stopped. He was, Floyd's little brother per se. Before the fight, if you saw, Mayweather Canelo All Access, you saw that Broner made some appearances on there. He looked fat. He looked overweight. He was bragging, how he was out touring with Soulja Boy and Lil Wayne, how he's partying it up, and how, that, the Maidana fight wasn't going to be no problem for him. It was a wake-up call. He got his ass handed to him, and, in a right way. And so he can only humble him from here on forward. He needs to get back in the gym, forget all the partying, all the flash, stick to boxing, train more than what, his training camp is scheduled for. Just get back in the gym, prove and win the fans back. Whatever fans that he had, he probably lost in this fight, the way he acted afterwards. This is what champions are made of. It's what you do after a loss. He needs to get back, bounce back. He can still be the pound-for-pound king once Mayweather retires, but he's got to discipline himself a lot better than this. Not even Floyd acted as over the top as Broner has in his career. So, if he wants to get to that level of Floyd, he's got to make some sacrifices. Floyd, always disciplined himself, out, in and out of the ring, and Broner needs to do more of the same.
Yeah, an interesting piece there was, a lot of people mentioned this as well, where Broner left the ring with none of his entourage. It was only a couple bodyguards, and it's lonely at the top, as that saying goes there, and it's even lonelier at the bottom sometimes, which is what he hit last night. And none of his band camp was around. They seemed to have dispersed, and who knows what happened to them thereafter. But, maybe he needs to, maybe this will humble him and have him go back to the drawing board and restructure who's in his inner circle and really influencing him outside of the ring for his own sake. Yeah, I hope so. Hope he does make some changes there. Going forward, Brandon, I mean, the same kind of marketing muscle that's been pushed behind Broner up until this point, regardless of all the out-of-ring antics that he's pulled, from the strip clubs to the photos on Instagram, etc. Just stuff that is just detesting in some ways. But do you see them continually are they going to be backing him up still like they have been and stick to their guns there, or do you think they should switch gears up here and maybe put some of that marketing muscle behind a guy like Keith Thurman or a Danny Garcia, who's been kind of just sitting on the shelf there as far as pull from their promoter?
I think what the latter is definitely going to happen. From actually having an encounter and speaking with one of the PR guys with Showtime Sports, that is kind of what their plan going into 2014, is they plan on making a push towards Keith Thurman. And with Keith Thurman's performance last night, it's going to make a lot more sense for him to get that push. And Danny Garcia is going to also be someone who's going to now inherit part of that promotional push that Broner had. He's going to reap the benefits of that now, because he's also now a Hammond fighter. He is the top dog at 140 pounds. So it's now, I said last week on Twitter, if anyone who follows me, I said, leading up to the Broner fight, the heir apparent to Floyd Mayweather's crown as being the top fighter pound for pound is Danny Garcia. Last night was just further proof of that. This is going to be for Danny Garcia's taking if he wants it. He is going to be the man in the power position to do so. So I strongly look in 2014 for Golden Boy to start really putting that marketing power and dollars behind those two gentlemen, Thurman and Garcia, and building them up, because they're going to need to find other opponents for Floyd Mayweather, and they're also going to need to find new stars for tomorrow once Floyd retires, and they're looking to milk and corner the pay-per-view market for boxing.
Yeah, no, totally agree with you on that one there. Broner seems like he may be going to spiral out of control at this point in time, but again, hope for his own sake he doesn't. Going forward with him, I mean, as far as a comeback fight, there's already been circulation about a rematch in place. Maidana was quick to jump on it and say, hey, no problem, let's do it. Word was that Broner was already asking for one immediately afterwards as well. Then later on we find out that apparently there wasn't a rematch clause in there, which shame on Broner's camp for not being careful enough with them and being arrogant enough not to negotiate that into the contract there. Should a rematch not go through forward for Broner, I mean, should he take a lighter fight coming up there, or should they throw him in a mix with maybe somebody like an Adrien Broner or Robert Guerrero or anybody up in that mix there? What do you think, Brennan?
Well, I thought if Broner won that, Paulie Malignaggi was going to push for that rematch. If anyone who watched last night's broadcast, you notice Paulie seemed really, really salty after the fight.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because with Broner losing, there goes his payday and his rematch. So I still think that may be a possibility. It would make sense for Broner to maybe go after that fight first, because that may be a little bit more winnable fight for him. I would throw him in there with a guy like Guerrero. Guerrero will maul him the same way Maidana did. So you want to go put him in there with someone who's a light puncher who can possibly outbox, outskill, be quicker than, instead of throwing him right back in the mix with Maidana. If he wants that fight, Maidana is someone who has all the cards in his hands. He ought to be able to dictate everything. And again, he's an out-Hammond fighter, so he should be in that position to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But I really honestly think you're going to probably see Malignaggi Broner 2. Late spring or earlier late spring next year as being his next fight.
So as far as Maidana's concerned, Steve, going forward with him, I mean, who could we see him in the mix with? Who would you like to see him face up next? I think the whole matchup or the idea, as Schaefer had been talking about with Thurman and Maidana, may not be something they're willing to gamble on just yet, because those are two guys that are going to be their cash cows for a minute anyways. What's next on the table for Maidana? Just a long rest before he comes back and throws him up again, or do you think that they're going to throw him back in right away with somebody else here?
Well, let him get a little rest. It's been kind of a busy year for Maidana as well. With the hard fight with Lopez and now this fight. I think regardless, it's always going to be a great fight anytime you have Marcos Maidana in the ring. You know, there's not going to be any real promotional push that you got to put towards Maidana. Maidana sells itself. Fight fans are always going to tune in to see this man fight, regardless of who he's fighting. So nothing changed from going forward. Probably some bigger paydays for him, some bigger money, which I think is what he wants. I think he can care less about, you know, fame or stardom. I think he's about that check. So, you know, anything, you know, sky's the limit for Maidana right now. Get him some big fights, regardless of who it is.
Hit it right on the head there with Maidana sells itself. Ever since people started hearing about that punching power he possesses, kind of like, you know, Keith Thurman. You know, he's got that knockout power. People just love to see a knockout, or they love to see somebody get, you know, their ass handed to them, and both of those guys are capable of delivering on that. Well, some good stuff. Had me jumping out of my chair and yelling at the TV. Probably you guys as well. Definitely a great fight, great card overall, and looking forward to what 2014 is bringing us up here. Fight fans and listeners, I want to thank you for tuning in once again to the TitleFight.com roundtable. Visit my boy Brandon over at PunchToTheFace.com. Keep tabs with us over at the Title Fight on Twitter. Again, signing off. Until next time.